Well, welcome to video number 7. Have you ever had something you just really dreamed of doing? Have you ever had this great success, this big project that you wanted? Maybe there's something that you had that you wanted to have happen, and you had dreamed about it for a long time and thought about it, and it just was hard to get it to happen. And finally it did. Finally you were able to get there, and you got finished, and then you were disappointed because half of it was in the struggle to get there. And then when you realize you did, it wasn't as exciting. And some of the things that I think we look up to and live up to, we kind of get bored with. And we don't appreciate those as much, and we just let it go. It's not all we thought it would be. It's not everything that we were believing could happen there. And so when you think about it, there's things that we have in life that are goals, that are priorities that we set, that we try to achieve. And oftentimes we do achieve them. We get it. We get the house paid off. We get the car paid off, only to see another car that we want. We get something happening in a promotion at work, and we get this great job, only to find out the job is a whole lot harder than the other job. And while there may be more perks and a better salary, we also find that the work is just incredible. And it's a lot more than what we actually wanted. And so sometimes we look at our life and we get what we wanted and we have success, but it doesn't really bring happiness. We wanted to talk a little bit about Elijah today and about some of the things that happened with Elijah. And I think we may find some similarities with our life today. Elijah is one of the better known prophets in the Old Testament. And so Elijah was a great man, and yet he lived in the middle of a time when Israel was wicked. They had a king named Ahab and a queen named Jezebel, and usually Jezebel is the name that's recognized most. And so while we recognize the name of Jezebel, it's not someone we look up to. It's someone we recognize as being wicked, and both of those people were wicked, and they turned the nation wicked. Well, I think Elijah finds himself in that kind of a situation. The nation around him is wicked, and he's trying to be a prophet of God. He's trying to do things right, and they just aren't paying attention. They recognize he's a prophet of God, and anytime they need a healing or need to know whether or not they're going to win a war, they will come to him. Oh, go ask the prophet of God. And so they recognize his link with God. They recognize he's able to do miracles, and he had done a number of things. Right before we look in 1 Kings 19, we see that he had tried to get his nation back, and so he had asked God not to let it rain, and it doesn't rain for 3.5 years. Well, that's a long time. The king's mad at him, everybody's mad at him, they've all been worshiping Baal, and of course you may remember about the contest, and so he calls for this contest. Let's all make an altar to our God, and the God who answers by fire, that one is God. And sure enough, he lets them build their altar first and call on their God first, and nothing happens. Call on him half of the day, nothing happens. And so Elijah builds his altar and gets it all there and pours water on it. 3 times he goes back and just drenches it in water. And then at the time of the evening sacrifice, it says, he prays to God. And God responds in a powerful way. God rains down fire on that altar and burns up the sacrifice, burns up the water that was there, burns up everything. I mean, it's fire out of heaven, literally one of the greatest things God has done. And all the people recognize the Lord is God. And so they know he's God. Not only on top of that, but he kills the 450 prophets of Baal. And so there is no more Baal religion. They don't have any more people where they can spread that gossip and those lies about who God really is. And so he is effectively taking care of their religion. On top of that, he is there with Ahab, and they're about to go back, and he prays that it would rain. And there comes this strong wind, and there's a little cloud, and sure enough, it starts a downpour. And then he has a race with Ahab. Ahab's driving a chariot. Elijah's on foot. Well, which do you think's going to win? Elijah, because he is God's prophet. And not only does he win the fire contest, he wins the race, he wins the water contest. He's able to win every contest that there is, every single thing that happens. And so he is an amazingly powerful prophet because the things that he did and the things that he said come true. And everyone knows it and everyone realizes it, that those things are really from God, and that he truly is a prophet of God. But it has not changed his nation, and they have not turned back to God, and they have not turned around and said, okay, now we're going to serve God. They recognize he is God, but that didn't mean there was going to be a difference in their own life. And it didn't mean that they were going to change their habits. And so they wait. And sure enough, the wicked king is still wicked. And the wicked queen is still wicked. And so the people do not choose God. What do? If you pull off the biggest miracle and prove God to be true in front of every single person, and it doesn't make any difference, what do you do then? 1 Kings 19. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "May the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." And he was afraid, and he arose and he ran for his life, and he came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and he left his servant there. And he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and he came and he sat down under a broom tree, and he asked that he might die, saying, "It is enough now. O Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers." And he lay down and he slept under the broom tree, and behold, an angel touched him and said, "Arise and eat." And he looked, and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and drank and lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came to him a second time and touched him and said, "Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you." And he arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. Well, Ahab tells Jezebel about what happened in 1 Kings 19. And as the story goes, Jezebel seems to be the stronger of the pair, and so she swears that Elijah's going to be dead. She is going to take care of the problem once and for all. She's going to kill Elijah, and then they will be free of this troublemaker. And Elijah realizes all of the things that I've done, everything that I've seen, every way that I've proven God has not made any difference at all. And so he runs away. And he runs, I think, for the whole day into the wilderness because he hasn't made any difference. There are so many people who have died. There are so many things that have happened. And now he's had the ultimate proof, and it's not ultimate proof because it has not changed anything. And I think he thought it was going to make all the difference if we could just give proof of God. If God would just show himself once, wouldn't it make all the world believe? And the answer is no, it wouldn't. Because evil is very much entrenched in the world. And so Elijah there has no opportunity to do anything with this. And he runs away, but he runs into the wilderness. Angel wakes him up, gives him food, and tells him to eat. He lays back down, goes to sleep, wakes him up, gives him more food, tells him to sleep. He gets back up, gives him more food. And then he goes in that strength 40 days and 40 nights further into the wilderness toward Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. And so once again, we find ourselves in the wilderness at the mountain of God. And it's one of those amazing times where Elijah has come there not like Moses, where he's leading a number of people out, but he has come there in order to run toward God. And so when you think about this and what Elijah's actually doing, it's one of those amazing stories, because couldn't God answer Elijah's prayer already? Didn't he have the ability to answer every prayer Elijah had ever prayed? He could answer the prayer for fire from heaven. He could answer the prayer for no rain. He could answer the prayer for rain to start again. He could answer the prayer for so many things right where Elijah was. So why did he run away? Does he think he's going to be closer to God in the wilderness? Well, he does run to a place where God has been known to live, or where God has been known to meet his people. And so perhaps that's what he's thinking as he runs to Mount Horeb. It is known as the mountain of God. But that's a long way. I mean, 40 days of travel. That's a long way just to be able to be in the wilderness and be able to do those things. It's a lot of effort. And yet I think it's what he needs to do. He is so discouraged by it all, because we always think if we just get this, if we just do this, we could win. It will make all the difference. This one thing will turn the tide, and everyone will believe us again. We'll be a good father if our son just sees us do this. We'll be a good parent or mother if our daughter just sees us do this. We'll be a better employee if our boss just, and we get the success, and it makes no difference. Nothing happened. It didn't matter. Or at least we think it didn't matter. And that's where Elijah is. He's trying to deal with these kind of feelings. And we might expect that from people, but we don't expect that from God. We do not expect God to not hear us. And we do not expect, if God is all powerful and if God uses his power, that it won't change the way people are. And so as he runs away, he comes to the mountain of God. I think he needs to be alone. He needs to be able to talk to God. He needs to be where he can hear God. He needs to be where he believes God's going to hear him. He needs to be where he feels like God's going to listen now. He needs to be at that place where he has God's full attention. God has his full attention, because he just doesn't get it. And he may not even know how to ask the question. Have you ever been to that point where we get so discouraged with life, and we thought it would be better? Perhaps it's something at church, and we thought this was going to make the difference, and now everyone will start coming, or now people will be saved, or now, and it doesn't matter what we do or what project or what program or what effort we put into it, it has some effect, it has some result. But we thought we would win, and we'll chalk it up to the fact that, okay, it wasn't a big enough win. What if you had the biggest win for the whole nation? And you're left with the conclusion it really doesn't make a difference. Now, how do you serve God? Now, how do you do this? And so Elijah is facing those questions as he goes to the mountain of God. Well, we're in the superstitions, superstition mountainous, the superstition wilderness. It's all around us today. I've always thought this mountain looks a lot like Mount Horeb. It probably has nothing to do with Mount Horeb and doesn't look anything like Mount Horeb. It's one of those amazing places where we might go to be able to encounter God. Well, maybe you've gone away to a conference sometime, to a really exciting speaker, to somebody that you really respect, and they've said some amazing things, and you've come to see God in a whole new way. And you've come to see your life and to realize your life and to be aware of things that you never saw before. And so you try to figure out how to do this when you get home, and you spend a couple days, and the singing is great, and the prayers are great, and the speakers are wonderful, and the people are away, so they all have time for each other. No one's rushed, no one's hurried, and it's just so exciting to do that. And you come back home, and you realize you're back home. And you try and tell somebody about how exciting it was and how great it was and all the things that you learned and the way in which you saw things and what speakers said, and they just look at you kind of funny as if, well, you'll get over it. And the really sad part is you do get over it, right? For some reason, we lose that excitement, and we're not as excited as what we were when we first went there and when we experienced all of these things. And all of those things are still true. Every single thing that we learned is absolutely right. And everything we realized about ourselves and the changes we were going to make and the things we needed to do were absolutely what needed to be done. And for some reason now, we just have a hard time. And other people have discouraged us. And maybe they didn't say, oh, you'll never make it or anything like that. Maybe they weren't quite that blunt, but they just kind of like, yeah, okay, sure. And then it's the routine of everyday life. And it's the routine of having to be at work. And it's the routine of having to do all these other things that just kind of weighs us down. And then the first person disagrees with us and doesn't take our opinion at all. And it kind of gets to us some, and we just don't quite know how to deal with that. And so we're trying to figure out the best way to live this life, these new commitments that we've made, and pretty soon we're just back to the same old ones. And we realized that it was great and it was wonderful, but you can't live there. And the question becomes, why not? Well, because we see all the world around us. I think for Elijah, it was the fact that the world he lived in was wicked. The world we live in is wicked. Around him was a lot of hatred and animosity toward God. They wanted blessings from God, but they also didn't want to follow God. They wanted to serve Baal and worship Baal, and so they did. And so when you look at that, Elisha becomes very, very frustrated with this whole thing. How can this possibly be true? How can this happen? But it does.
1 Kings 19:9. There he came to a cave and lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said to him, What are you doing here, Elijah? And he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. And he said, Go out and stand on the mountain of the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by. And a great strong wind tore the mountain and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. And the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, and the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper.
The word of the Lord came to him and said, What are you doing here, Elijah? And he says, I have been very zealous for the Lord. And they've torn down your altars, and they've killed your prophets, and I'm the only one left. There's not anybody else here. I am the only one left. And he's already asked to die. He's already said there's no use. That's what he said when he got into the wilderness, is why don't you just let me die? And so God asked, what are you doing here? And he tells him, I want you to go out and stand in front of the cave. But first, there's this huge wind that comes. And the wind is so strong, it starts breaking out the rocks from the mountain. And as it breaks out rocks from the mountain, you can imagine if you're on the mountain and you're in that cave and there's rocks falling down, you can probably see where rocks have fallen down. You can probably even pick out a cave up there. There's lots of caves in these. And so you can see how he would be up there hiding in that cave, and you can see that this wind just starts ripping your mountain apart. Well, that's a really strong wind, and God's not in the wind. There's an earthquake, and God's not in the earthquake. And then there's a fire. It's a big fire, and God's not in the fire. And I think that one's especially telling for Elijah because he's just been allowed to call for fire, and God has rained fire down from heaven right on the altar. And right to be proof. Here's fire to show that God is God. That's even what he told the people. The God who answers by fire, he is God. And this fire comes upon the mountain, and he realizes God is not in the fire. And then there comes the sound of a whisper, the sound of a gentle blowing, the sound, it says in one place, of a thin silence.
1 Kings 19:13. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak, and he went out and he stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, What are you doing here, Elijah? And he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant and thrown down your altars and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away.
And Elijah gets up from his cave and he wraps his mantle around him and he goes out and stands in front of the cave because there's God. The word of the Lord came to him before, and now God's talking to him. And so this has got to be really good. What's God going to say to his prophet after an introduction like that? And God, in his most profound way, says, What are you doing here, Elijah? I find that amazing. Elijah answers exactly the same thing because, after all, nothing has changed. I have been very zealous for you, God, and they have torn down your altars. They have killed your prophets, and I am the only one left, and they are seeking my life to kill me. And he's got to realize that he's come to a place where God is, and he's been able to talk to God. And God's answer seems to be in the question, What are you doing here? Aren't you my prophet? What do you do here, Elijah? You ran away. You're my prophet. You're the one guy I could count on in all of Israel. You're the one righteous man left out of a whole nation because you're right. They've torn down my altars. They've killed all the other prophets, and you're running away to hide in the mountain of God? Really? What are you doing here, Elijah? And I don't know if he gets it. I don't know if he ever gets it. I wish we had more to the story about what he was thinking, about what he realized in all of this. Because as we see him unfold all of this, he just gives the same answer. I doubt that he can see anything else. I'm depressed. I'm down. I've had every success and it's failed. How can you have successful failure? But that's what he's got, is successful failure. And so he asks him, What are you doing here? All of us have been there too. We have been in situations and we have been in times where we have been so excited and we've been zealous for the Lord. Yet there's nobody else, God. There's nobody else to help me. There's nobody else to do anything with me. And God, it's just me. And I think in a lot of churches, we find people like that. They feel like they're the only ones and that they're alone in all of this. Well, the good news is that's not really the case. I don't know if you've ever been in this dilemma or not, but I really think if we're honest with ourselves, everybody has. I really think we all face this. There are times when we've tried really hard and done everything we possibly could, and it isn't enough. At least it's not enough for what we expected and wanted. We expected to win. and that by winning it would make a difference.
1 Kings 19:15. And the Lord said to him, Go and return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, and Jehu the son of Nimshi you shall anoint to be king over Israel, and Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel-Meholah you shall anoint to be prophet in your place. And the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael shall Jehu put to death, and the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees who have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him.
So then what's God's answer? God's answer is very simple. It's time to go back to work. What? That's it? It's time to go back to work? Yeah, because you may be the last one, but you are the last one, and you are not finished yet. And it was never about you, Elijah. It's never about your success. It's never about how big you're going to be. It's never the fact that God invested in you and put in you all of the things that God wanted and made you this great success so that you can win. And we like those kind of stories, don't we? I mean, Noah built an ark. It was Noah's ark. And Noah rode in the ark, and he had sons. And Noah came out of the ark, and we can see all the things that God did. But it's Noah. And Elijah's a prophet in Israel. And Elijah, you're 1,000th of the way through. And what I want you to do is I want you to anoint Hazael king over Syria, Jehu king over Israel, and Elisha as a prophet in your place. Because you are not the last one. There are 7,000 who have not bowed a knee to Baal. And you're just finding your replacement. Because the work that you have is important, and the work that you're doing goes on, even if it's God invested in just one person. That one person is his light. That one person is the person God wants there. And even if all the success he has seems like it's not going to make a difference, it's what God wants then. And God could do anything he wanted. He could convert the whole nation like he does for Jonah. He could rain fire down from heaven and consume them. He could split the ground and swallow them. He could do anything he wants, and what he wants is a faithful prophet to stand there and say something that's his word. And that's what it is. You see, we want success to fix the problem, and God wants a man to be faithful. And a man who will stand in the face of the wind and the fire and say, that's not God. Let me show you God. He is in the thin silence. When you sit quiet enough, and when you get discouraged enough, and when you need for him to be there, he's there. And he will ask you this question: what are you doing here? And the answer is, I'm being faithful to God. I'm doing exactly what I see God wants me to do. I'm doing everything that's possible to fulfill the things that God has told me. And we can see that's how we do it. We become exactly what God wanted us to be. And we are one little part of the huge puzzle. Everybody was part of it. It isn't up to one of us to win it. And yet we see so many people who tried to win it. In the Bible, there's a man named Jesse. Jesse doesn't do any great works. He's not a king. He's not a prophet. He's not inspired. He's a dad. That's who he is. And he has a boy named David. What was Jesse supposed to do? He was supposed to have a boy named David And he was supposed to raise that boy with enough faith that that boy can be king, that that boy can kill giants, that that boy can write psalms, that boy can do everything that God wants. And still, as great as King David was, he's no King Jesus, because he sends King Jesus to take the place of David, to sit on David's throne. And he said, David, you are just getting the throne warm, because now the real king comes. And every single one of us is part of the bigger picture. And if we could just see that and say, I fulfilled my part of the bigger picture of what God really wants, of what God has sent me here to do, then we would be able to make all the difference. Because that's what God wants, someone who's faithful. Isn't this what we want? I'm the king of the mountain. Everything is below me. I made it to the top. And that's not what God wants. God wants someone who will be faithful. God wants someone who will look up to him. Not to be king of the mountain, not to win, but somebody who wins by being faithful. Someone who realizes he's part of God's plan and does what God wants. And just to give you a little perspective of the top of the mountain. It goes more like this. We realize the picture is much bigger than we are. That the picture is huge. Stand on the top of your mountain and let God be glorified in it.